I've always wondered why do great companies grow exponentially? Was it the big strategic decisions or the tiny changes? Or both, right? To answer that, I asked, first, what does the literature and data says about the 1% rule? Second, how can tiny changes lead to big outcomes? Do exponential companies actually apply the strategy? And if so, how can we apply this to our business? And is there an easy template for this? So first, what data do we have on this topic? Okay, so what do we know about the tiny changes that have big impact? First, we should learn about the basic concepts such as butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is essentially when a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world, the result could be tornado on the other side of the world. So the tiny things like butterfly flap can have a huge unpredictable consequences. But this example sounds a little bit like a science fiction. So how does this work in a business? Let's look, for example, at the Kaizen concept. Kaizen is a Japanese philosophy that focuses on a continuous improvement in all aspects of life, but nowadays it's mostly applied in business. First, I came across this book Kaizen around 10 years ago. The book was about use of Kaizen in the concept of manufacturing. Kaizen comes from two Japanese words, Kai for change and Zen for the better. So it is about continuous change for the better. The Japanese mentality is the reason why some Japanese products are considered the highest quality. So we can use this concept, but there is also one author who writes about turning tiny changes to remarkable results. James Clear, with the book that you might already know, Atomic Habits. And if you haven't read that one, it's a must. It's one of the best books I've read. So James Clear in his book introduces the idea of atomic habits, which are small incremental changes that can compound into remarkable results over time. In this case, we won't talk just about habits, but also tasks and objectives. In Atomic Habits, James Clear gives many examples that prove his point. For example, the philosophy of marginal gains was used to improve the British cycling team. The team made small changes to everything they could think of, from bike seats to hand washing techniques, and all of them contribute probably 1% or less to the overall outcome. The point is, these small changes aggregate, and later they led to significant improvements in the team's performance. British cycling went from winning only 1 gold medal in 76 years to securing 8 gold medals at the 2008 Olympics. So it's not magic. There is some data and science. By the way, this could be used in anything: education, investing, exercise, nutrition, but here we are focused on business. Now let's see, how can tiny changes lead to big outcomes? Well, if it's not magic, how does this 1% rule work? The great analogy for the 1% rule is climbing a ladder. Would you rather choose ladder with the small steps or the one with the bigger steps? An experienced climber would probably have big steps because they want to go fast. Small steps for them are inefficient and actually can slow them down. What it means is ladder with the small steps can be climbed by pro and beginner at the same time, only creating a small disadvantage for the pro climber. While a ladder with the big steps can be only used by pros. From this example, there is really no reason not to break down things to the small parts. Breaking things into small steps, especially in the long run, minimizes resistance and makes it easier to be motivated. You are one small step closer every time. In other words, it's less likely that you give up. But here's the important part: not all tiny changes lead to great outcomes. Only some of them do. So how do we recognize them? Let's take our example of ladder. The ladder direction is from point A to point B. If you are building the ladder, adding steps to the top of the ladder is obviously getting you closer to the point B. You don't make the ladder wider or two-headed. That is just a waste of energy or resources if the main goal is to get to point B. With this analogy, all you have to decide is if the things that you are working on is a part of the ladder that gets you to point B. Now let's get more practical. Our exponential company is using the 1% rule of incremental improvements. Toyota is known to be the original Kaizen champion. The Kaizen approach helped Toyota become one of the largest and most reliable car manufacturers in the world. Another one, in shareholder letter, Jeff Bezos frequently discusses how Amazon focuses on the small things that matter to customers.
But the number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive, compulsive focus on the customer as opposed to obsession over the competitor.
Speed, convenience, better selection, more reviews, and better recommendations. If the latter is a customer experience, all of these aggregates to having happy customers. The former chief product officer of Netflix discussed how ongoing incremental improvements are essential to keeping viewers engaged. And then Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, often stressed continuous improvement in areas like AI and machine learning. And if there is one exponential company with one big ladder from point A to point B, it's got to be Google. Their search went through thousands of incremental tweaks and became the best engine on the planet. But these are big companies. How can we apply this for our business? Here's how I apply the 1% rule for a car dealership, which is one of my clients. So they want to grow their sales. How are they going to do it? Usually these companies will say something like, we need to do more marketing. And that's not a good approach. Growing sales or doing more marketing is just direction. In our example, it is just like knowing we need a ladder because we will go up, but no one told you where or how high. So the first step is to define point A and point B. The plan has to be specific. Instead of grow sales, let's be specific. Grow sales by 1,000 cars in 2025. Suddenly we have point A, which is where we are now, and point B, which is adding 1,000 sales. Second, we identify the ladder. We need to figure out more about the ladder that can take us from point A to point B. This is the most important part of the 1% rule. This is not about thinking out of the box or having aha moment. This is about incremental improvements of something that is already in place or should take a place. And most businesses overcomplicate this part. Businesses usually already have the data. They know what took them from 0 cars to sell 10,000 cars. Now, we only need to figure out how to sell 1,000 cars more. So I'll draw a ladder, how we previously get from 0 to 10,000 sold cars, and define each part of the ladder. For example, I know that 30% of all cars are sold through leads from the parent company. Then 25% of all cars are sold through website, and then 20% via branch sales, and 10% emails or newsletter, and 5% via phone, and 5% is the rest. Now, once we define the ladder we want to climb, I'm not going to necessarily think of new ways to bring customers in. I will not go and advertise on a new platform because we have no data on that. Instead, I will implement the 1% rule on things that I know that works. And how do I do that? I break down the steps. So the step number 3, break down the steps. In this particular case, I can't influence the parent company leads. That's just a fact. The next thing I can influence is the website sales. Instead of looking at this website like complex thing, I'll break down things into small pieces. But again, I'm going to focus only on things that move you from point A to point B. We are not building the ladder wider, we are not building the ladder two-headed. So I will look at the specific pages that the website has that are bringing the sales or leads. And I will realize that website pages like models, stock cars, used cars, and configurator are bringing 90% of all sales from the website. So at this point, I'll probably not pay attention to pages like blog, services, or about us. And I will do this with every part of the ladder: branch sales, emails, and phone communication. I'll break it down to find the sources of the car sales. And after the steps are broken down, now the fourth step is to optimize those steps. So in theory, if I increase visitors by 1% on all of these 4 pages, that brings most of the sales. It will total 4% more visitors that could lead to approximately 4% more sales from the website. These 4% can contribute about 2% to overall sales. And I only need 10% more sales to get from 10,000 cars to 11,000 cars sold. All you have to do is find these 1% incremental improvements. And we got to the final part: compound improvements. Here's the reason why strategy of incremental yet stacked improvements is so powerful for anyone playing the long-term game. Imagine 2 car dealerships, both starting with 10,000 sold cars every year. The first dealership only focuses on the ladder, which actually grows sales by 10% every year. Every year, they are building and improving the ladder that was already improved and built the previous year. The second dealership focuses on growing by 10% per year across the whole company. It is hard to see the difference of this strategy over the first or the second year period, but after 20 years of compounded growth, sales of the first dealership grew exponentially to around 62,274 sold cars per year instead of 30,000 sold cars per year. Okay, now how do I actually implement this? Is there a template? I know many people will be at this point like, yeah, that makes sense. Or some of you will even say that it's obvious. But from my experience, most businesses will still have problem applying the 1% rule. So yes, I made a free template for you that you can use. But for all of you lazy business imposters, it won't fill itself. You still need to apply the first principle thinking. So I understand it's not easy. So if you need help with this template or with business in general, let me know via the link down below. The best use case for this template is marketing or sales, but frankly, it can be used for anything. The way to get it for free is to sign up for my newsletter and I will send it to you. And there are 2 businesses that apply the 1% rule and one in business. So go watch either McDonald's story or the Nvidia story next. Both exponential companies with tons of things to learn from.